My name is Henk Huizer. I work as a curriculum and learning designer at QUT. Today's session is called Belonging in Online Environments. It's based on a Journal of University Teaching and Learning practice, Journal of University Learning and Teaching and Learning Practice, special issue. And what I'll do is I'll put the link in the chat, so you can have a look at that. And so that came out a few weeks ago now, and I saw that the editor Joey is here as well today, so welcome. And so basically I've selected a couple of papers that sounded interesting and relevant to TELedvisors today to present. And the next presenter is Dr. Beate Mueller, who did undergraduate and postgraduate studies in applied linguistics at Friedrich Schiller University in Germany. She did her PhD at Macquarie, and she's been at UTS since 2018. Her presentation is and her paper in the Juttelpol special issue is called Belonging in Online Work Integrated Learning Spaces. So over to you, Beate.
Thank you so much, Henk. Thanks for the invitation. Can you hear me okay? I'm still trying to work out the platform because I really don't know what you can see or what I can see. So thanks a lot for inviting me here today, and thanks to everyone for coming in. So as Henk said, so I'm Beate Mueller. I'm a lecturer in international studies at UTS at the moment. I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation as one of the groups of the traditional owners of the land that I work on, and extend my respect to all the traditional owners of all the lands that you are joining us from today. Thank you. So I'll be speaking to you about belonging in online work integrated learning spaces, or short WIL, and draw on the findings of a study that I conducted with my two collaborators, Martin Andrew from Otago Polytechnic and Melissa Connor, who used to work for the University of Adelaide. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we are all three of us are WIL practitioners, and we draw on research from our teaching and cohorts, for our student cohorts. In my case, it's with international internship students, mostly undergraduate students. Martin draws on a cohort of postgrad students that did e-practicums during the pandemic as pre-service teachers. And then Melissa drew on a cohort that were undergraduate students in non-placement WIL classes. So when I say e-WIL, I mean any form of electronic, virtual, remote, or online work integrated learning. And work integrated learning can have many different forms as well. So we can have placement WIL as in practicums or internships, or non-placement as in classes or any kind of sort of professional learning experiences within our curriculum that is not placement with external partners. So we know that this is a contested field, and the practices of online learning and working may not just bring about benefits to all stakeholders. So we contend that fostering belonging is actually one of the key strategies to mitigate some of these disadvantages, and it's still quite under-researched. Next slide, please. So we draw on among other frameworks, on the community of inquiry model of online learning by Swan, Garrison, and Richardson, and find that this model has very strong links to belonging in WIL, especially in the dimension of social presence. as students belong to different cohorts in their university with the organizations to also imagine communities of professionals around the world. And in 2020, Bryant and Crowther added a fourth dimension of collegial presence to this that very much applies to will contexts, and collegial presence as in conducting or being in meetings together, getting feedback, mentoring processes, collaborations, teamworks, and so on. So especially the two presences of social and collegial presence allow us to move away from the dimension of teacher presence in classrooms to examine the wider organizational environment as influential for belonging in will. So we apply these frameworks, and we have to, of course, consider that will or e-will has many different forms. So, and it's really contextual in that sense. Our study was based on our research and engagement with the students during the pandemic, and I will basically present some of the outcomes, some of the findings we had. And similar to what Nicole said, I will also introduce some of the some examples of sort of bad examples of belonging and where it went really well, and sort of maybe summarize some of the strategies that students suggested and that also come out of our practice. Okay, next slide. The first theme that we explored was humanizing e-will, and humanizing online learning is not a new idea, but we were especially interested in how that works in work integrated learning. So we move beyond social presence of just lingering online or commenting online to very solid learner-centered strategies of humanizing digital learning in will spaces. And we saw that acts of humanizing e-will are reflected in the way people build relationships, communicate with each other, maybe using different communication platforms and in synchronous meetings. So one of the very frequently mentioned examples from students was actually that first day of an internship or a placement, or the first meeting, or something like an induction meeting or something like this, that very much sets the tone for belonging to an organization, to a team, to a project, and so on. But that can also bring about very much mismatched expectations that students often complained about. So I'll give you a bad example from one student in a virtual internship who already had low expectations about virtual internships. But then this first meeting just increased this ambiguity and frustration for that student. So in that first meeting, she was just briefly introduced to everyone else. The staff members were introduced to her, and then the meeting jumped straight back into the normal agenda about what projects need to be done, what tasks need to be done. So there wasn't an induction at all. There was no feeling of belonging to this organization. And in fact, after the meeting, that student never saw anyone's face ever again. So that was the only meeting that was ever held. So that heightened her feelings of isolation, reduced belonging, and where trust couldn't be established on that first day. Every interaction she had then with her supervisor and with colleagues felt very strained, and also like an imposition that increased her imposter feelings very much. However, we also learned about really positive examples, one being that internship providers or overseas companies sending students welcome packages. So companies, for example, with a company uniform or t-shirts, mugs, pens, everything you can have on stationery. So students could actually set up their desk at home, seeing all these sort of merchandising products and feeling like they belonged to this organization, building that identity with that organization. Another strategy that we learned about humanizing the experience was that in larger cohorts where supervisors had more than a few mentees, they would allocate them into stable study groups and sort of breakout rooms where they assigned a group monitor, and these group monitors acted on their behalf around certain tasks in these stable study groups. And that gave the supervisor then the ability to jump between different groups and help them where needed. Another student mentioned the importance of building trust, and she said, I realized the secret of cooperative learning was facilitating belonging by building trust. One strategy was that every time a learner made a contribution, they opened with their name and one detail about themselves. They also mentioned that managing turn taking in both synchronous meetings but also online very much enabled a more equitable access to communication spaces that actually afforded belonging in certain ways. So we think that as educators, we can role model some of these things. We don't realize that students in professional context are quite hesitant, that they are sometimes intimidated or scared by grown-ups, by supervisors, managers, bosses, and so on. So for example, role modeling first meetings around relationship building, about sort of building trust, but also around professional behaviors, you know, wearing professional attire, having your cameras on, appropriate backgrounds, mannerisms, and so on. That's really important. And then maybe helping students in role plays or little activities to scaffold professional conversations, professional small talk, and so on. And providing them with very positive, encouraging feedback is something that we can all do in our practices if we teach students. Next slide, please. You let me know when I'm running out of time. So the second theme was around mentor presence, and we were curious how this is similar or different to teacher presence in classrooms. So we know that the relationship, and we heard that from many students, between the supervisor or the mentor and the intern can be a very decisive factor about how students feel like they belong and so on. But it can also be an inhibitor of belongingness, very much so, especially in situations where one supervisor is matched up with one intern. They can develop a very close relationship, and students can feel very much like they belong and identify with the organization. But it also gives mentors a lot of power, and if they're not the role model people are looking for, that can decrease their belonging, and in fact even their belonging to this sort of imagined professional group, and make them question their choices. So I'll give you a bad example first. One student mentioned that her supervisor was often sharing personal details about colleagues and their private issues with her. And also in some of the meetings, she actually observed him using racist microaggressions towards other colleagues. But because it was in a different cultural context, she wasn't really sure how to intervene and how to react to that. So that, of course, she found that really disturbing, but she became really intimidated. And obviously this created this mismatch of values, expectations, behaviors, and so on. So to a point where she actually questioned if she wanted to be part of this professional group at all, and if she wanted to work internationally or globally, because she knew in the Australian context that would probably be something she wouldn't experience that much. So that shows very much that a supervisor can be a role model in a positive but also in a negative way. To give you a positive example, another student reflected on a very similar event that actually showed that a supportive and courageous supervisor can strengthen one's choice of career when shared values and behaviors and norms occur. So this was due to the mentor's ability to call out actually an aggressor during the class, and to also alleviate tensions appropriately. So the student said, being a teacher who's inclusive and considers the sense of belonging of all others, I realized was crucial to the teacher I wanted to become. And what students report they learned from their supervisors or mentor contributed strongly to their development of sense of confidence, agency, self-reliance, and so on. Another student said, I realized that the quality of a supervisor impacts on one entire practicum or internship experience. Also, students noticed that and appreciated the way feedback was given, especially positive feedback. And one student said the best part was the instructor's commentary and feedback to each individual and her ability to pull people together with hyperlinks, so that several of us realized we had the same experience, so we were able to debrief together. This gave us a sense of community, a sense of being able to share and to learn from each other, because our experience was perhaps not an outlier, but part of a broader normative pattern. So it shows that investment over time in building relationships, building trust, and so on, engagement is a function of establishing trust, and the presence of a supportive and trusting instructor or mentor or supervisor who models this in their own practice was an important and authentic learning experience for these students. Okay, last slide or last topic. The third theme we identified was fostering professional belonging or professional identity development. And this refers to the bigger picture of students imagining themselves as being part of a imagined community of professionals in their field, basically. So this aspiration can motivate will learners in very authentic ways. So first of all, they conceive of themselves as being a member of an imagined community. So they imagine themselves with a specific uniform, or as being in a school, being in a hospital, and so on. And these images of the future self basically can be very empowering and can be leveraged to increase engagement, success, and belonging. Second, students seek an alignment to those who operate at the core of these imagined professional communities, like supervisors, mentors, colleagues, and so on. So positive interactions and experiences online and an alignment of core values can lead to a strengthened sense of professional belonging and a reassurance about their professional choices. So whereas a lack of belonging might make them question these choices. So I'm almost finished. So some students said, for example, one student said, I was very impressed not only by the openness of those who ran the organization, but also their readiness to show me some of their outputs and mission. This reaction not only led me to believe that I could work in this domain, but also that I could myself belong to an organization such as this in the future. And another student said, the practicum experience has clarified for me that my choice to study education was right, and this is the area into which I will further my teaching career. To sum up some of our data and the impressions we got from our students, we can say that especially in postgrad areas, students did feel a fuller sense of belonging when participating on-site in on-site practicums or immersive internships. However, a lot of the undergraduate students said that they felt safer in online world spaces, especially those students who had very little work experience, or they weren't really sure of their career and degree choices, so they wanted to do low stakes internships, or those who were just not confident enough or wanted to build up the confidence to then immerse themselves in actual organizations or schools. Alrighty, I'll leave it at that. I think the next page is just a summary of our practice notes that we refer to in the article. Do we have time for questions? Or I couldn't really.
We have time for one quick question.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Yes, that was great. Thanks, Beate. Any quick questions? Now I've got a quick question. You mentioned the importance of the first meeting, as part of Humanizing Evil, and my question is, as part of that first meeting, is there a teacher presence in that first meeting, or is there? It's like, how does a teacher manages or ensures that there is that occurs?
I think it very much depends on the will context. Like in our international internships, we are not able to be there. So whereas if you have maybe organized placements through faculty or something like this, we often actually know our industry partners and we know the people we're working with. But I think very often students are left to their own devices, and that's why like maybe practicing professional small talk with them beforehand to give them a bit of confidence in how to start these conversations with employers and maybe what kind of questions to ask is really important.
All right, thank you. And thank you, Beate. If we can all just put our appreciation in the chat, that would be great.